Hello, everybody. What's going on? Welcome to the show tonight. I am so excited. Who is this person in front of you? Hi, my name is Janelle. I am one of the hosts of Comic Book Nation. Kofi is out on vacation, so I am here to party with you on Acolyte Aftermath. And with me, we have a Star Wars, I guess, aficionado, an amazing expert, Jamie Levitt. Thank you so much for being here, Jamie.
Hi, glad to be here.
You're the guy
This
who's
should be
always here.
interesting.
You're the main host, really. I mean, if we really talk about this, I'm more like the guest. And then also JK,
No. Happy to defer.
I'm so glad because we also dragged producer Pete onto the show because I am Star Wars noob. I'm representing kind of the casual viewers on the show. So Pete, thanks for being here with us.
Happy to be here. Just filling in for a sick JK.
Yeah, and you have like the floating ominous head. You're very Sith right now. Like, do you think you can represent like the Sith and Jamie can represent the Jedi? And
Why not?
I'll be a witch. Can I be one of the witches? Because they're cool.
You can be a weird pile of force vapor.
I don't know which one of us ends up being the bad guy in that scenario after this episode, honestly.
Very true.
So true. That is so true. So normally what you guys do is you kick it off with instant reacts, but we kind of got into a quick discussion before we started this. And Jamie just asked me flat out, Janelle, did you enjoy this episode? I feel like that's a really good way to kick off the show because yes, my answer, I'll go first, was yeah, I really enjoyed this episode. I actually loved our 2 episodes ago, I loved that episode because it was high action, really easy to digest. Like, okay, there's a lot of like things being thrown around, there's combat and action, and that's always fun. Last episode, I wasn't really into. It felt like it was dragging to me. I don't know all of the lore, so things didn't really hit for me. And finally, like, I feel like this is a little bit of both. I feel like we got both of those things. There was some action. There was obviously like great characters, and we're getting lots of stuff going on and story progression, why things happened in the past. All of that really, I love tying a bow on things, and I really enjoyed it because of this. But Jamie, what were you thinking? Flat out question, did you like the episode?
I gotta say, no, I didn't really enjoy this. There's so much. So I've been kind of the less hot on this show than the other co-hosts, but this episode really crystallized a lot of my problems because like this show has been like dabbling in being a whole bunch of different things. Like it's a murder mystery, it's a conspiracy show, it's a Sith lore dump or something. In like here, it's like it tries to be all those things again, and none of it really works. Like the execution bothers me. Like we open up with a scene of like you have a not Chewbacca, Wookiee. You have a Wookiee Jedi walking around with like a metal detector, like he's a beach bum on a Florida vacation or something. You have like the choices they make. This entire episode feels like I don't think they can justify splitting this episode and the previous flashback episode up. I don't think we get enough like game-changing revelations from this episode to justify having withheld all this information for so long, which has been the thing that irks me most is like, it doesn't feel like there's a mystery or conspiracy. It feels like you're just not telling me enough information for no really good reason. And so, yeah, that was very frustrating. You end up, and mostly I find the choice to make the big thing they were all hiding basically all Soul's fault way less interesting than what they were hinting at before, which was like
very true.
The Jedi did something bad. By the way, not just because I'm like the Star Trek fan in the group also, but this is why you have a prime directive. This is why you say don't go messing with other people's cultures that you don't understand. Prime directive, not perfect, but this is exactly the kind of mess that Starfleet usually wouldn't get into. But yeah, just so much weird stuff in this that did not gel together with me. The weird Padawan who just wanted to go home. Like, you're a Jedi, dude. What is going on? And some of the dialogue was just so clunky and broad. Like, she's possessed by dark magic or something. Or like, what? it just kept taking me out of it. I'm like, this feels like a really weird kind of slapdash production that doesn't know exactly, like, why are we hearing the word virgins for the first time in the second to last episode when apparently that has been the point of the whole series? I don't know what's going on.
I literally have this in my notes to ask you to explain the virgins. But before we do that, we have to ask Pete. We have to ask Peter if he liked it. Peter, did you like this?
I didn't hate it, and I did not like it, but it also definitely didn't deliver what I thought it was going to deliver. I was expecting, just like Jamie, for there to be, more than, oh no, Saul made a hasty decision with like good intentions and it backfired. I was hoping it to be like some sort of like, the Jedis as a whole made some sort of terrible group decision, or maybe we learned that like the Mother Anastaea's coven was really up to something far more nefarious. But really it's just sort of one Jedi kind of makes a decision that doesn't pan out, and then inexplicably becomes very weak in the Force towards the end for some reason, where, this is the same. We've seen pretty powerful acts of the Force in this series and all the other recent Star Wars series, but apparently 100 years ago, Jedis were very, very weak and could barely hold up 2 small pieces of metal and a child on each. Like, that was apparently too much. That was very strenuous for Soul.
This footage that we're showing in the loop, did you not see how that Padawan Jedi, with just the power of his wrist, apparently was able to like hold off the Wookiee Jedi's lightsaber? Like,
but that makes sense, because the only thing as weak as a Jedi is another Jedi. It was 2 weak Jedis being weak together, so it just looked very impressive. But no, Kelnaka came off. I thought Kelnaka was going to go into some kind of rage and like destroy the entire weird Coven temple, but it's just, I felt like you were saying, this promised a lot in the first 6 episodes of this series, and I kept on waiting for that promise to be delivered, and it got here, and it was like, oh, so you've been waiting all year for Christmas to get that PlayStation 5, and your parents are like, oh, it's a PS4 Pro, and you're like, well, I mean, it's better than not having a game console, but I kind of wanted the PS5.
These are the Jedi your mother told you have at home, is what's happening here.
Also, this scene was just odd. The Force vapor. I think.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Interesting.
Do we know what that
general.
is? Do we know what that is? Because while it was happening, as someone, I've never seen anything like this before, but I go in with such an open mind, because I'm like, well, maybe everybody else has already seen something like this before, so I should just take it for what I think it is. And I watch a lot of weird stuff, so it's just, my thoughts honestly was just that she was like transporting her and her daughter to safety somewhere. That's what I thought. I was like, oh, she's literally like taking them to a different area on the planet, or a different side of the room. She's just, I don't know, morphing them out of this dangerous situation. You guys had some other theories on this. Jamie, what were your thoughts?
So I thought the same thing you were thinking at first, until we got the shot of May's face, where I believe her mark turns white for the first time.
It does.
It was the first time I noticed it. That's for sure.
So we don't know for sure. Like, they haven't spelled it out point blank, but the impression I got was that she was trying to pass on her power and her essence and her knowledge to May, which I assume is what that ritual was all about. Like, maybe they were going to split that power in 2 with the 2 twins or something. I'm not sure, but some sort of essence transfer is what I was getting out of that after seeing that it seemed to activate her mark. But the presumption being that it did only like partially worked, since she got stabbed by the lightsaber before she could finish. And maybe that's why May doesn't possess all of the history and the backstory that her mother seemingly did. Is that about what you were thinking, Pete?
Yeah, it almost felt like maybe this was a weird part of that balancing ritual, where since May was so deeply involved in the dark side, maybe Anastasia thought she was going to try and balance her by connecting her with her, I guess, more light side abilities, but it was just sort of this nebulous thing. And then the only real context we're given is that meaningful look that Soul gives to the white mark on May afterwards. It implies some kind of transference has happened to a degree. But it could also, and I think what Saul probably thought was that it was something much more nefarious. Like maybe she was trying to transfer her soul into the child, or her essence, and that kind of leads us down the road of the big, the lurking like boogeymen to this series have always kind of been, where are Darth Tenebris and where is Darth Plagueis? And we all know Plagueis is all about preserving his life, transferring his essence into new bodies, cloning, and so it just kind of felt like maybe that's what Saul thought was happening, but I'm not sure what we were supposed to think happened there beyond she had some kind of force-based influence on May at the very last minute that, ultimately led to her getting lightsabered through the force vapor chest.
That's so interesting. So do we would you guys be happy if this tied into obviously like other properties, other Star Wars properties, if it did have some specific type of link, like last week's episode with it being the same island, like that Skywalker was on and all of that? Like, did you guys see that? Did you make that connection?
I do want to point out real fast in the chat that yes, Beskar books, you are correct. Soul has no chill. For a Jedi, he makes a ton. For a very calm seeming Jedi, he and Torben together are the two least Jedi I've ever seen.
I agree.
Torben just wants to go home to like the fancy planet, and Soul is just making wild emotional decisions out of nowhere when he's not trying to murder like pseudo Sith Lords. It's just weird balance with the Jedis.
They really, really need in this last episode that's coming up to deliver on like why he did that, like the question that Indara puts to him. Like, it better be a convincing, moving, engaging reason for you to hinge your entire series on his impulsive decision there and why he made it.
It needs to be better than Torben's of I want to go home because Coruscant is a nice planet.
Yeah, if Jedi had mothers, he was like 1 inch away from just being like, I want my mommy. Like that is where his attitude was. It's so weird. It is weird that they mentioned his father too, because like he shouldn't know who his father is. So I'm not sure how she would know who his father is, but I don't know. Jedi are weird sometimes.
Well, he could be. I mean, I assume that he was. It's sort of like a Count Dooku thing, where if you're fancy enough, you do get to know who your father is because your father's rich and he decided to let you go. And just sort of like how, Dooku always knew who his family was, which is why he went back to being a count when he got all disillusioned with the Jedi. And given how much he was whining about Coruscant, which is where all the money and the power is in this part of the galaxy, I just assume he's just like Jedi rich kid. Like he's the Jedi equivalent of my dad owns a dealership.
Oh, I could see that. Like a Danny Rand Jedi.
Yeah, very much so. Yes, and equally disappointing.
That's actually so interesting because I did have in my notes that Soul is Jedi light, like kind of like the Diet Coke of Jedi, because all I could see was it's just all these examples of him like answering like the Palawan's question instead of letting him figure it out for himself, or then like him not, and I don't even know if this has been clarified or not, but him in the last episode not recognizing that there had been a little swap between the girls until the end, like right at the end. I don't that he just seems like he's not in it to win it. He's not all the way Jedi, even later down the line, like as he gets gray hair and he's an older dude, and like so it has been a little confusing for me in that way.
Yeah, he has been a little like apparently very good at lightsaber combat and not very good at any of the other parts of being a Jedi. It's very odd.
Oh, and he attacked while the back was turned. I forgot about that. He attacked while his opponent's back was turned.
Yeah, he was about to straight up execute Kamir, which in retrospect might have been not a terrible idea, but
it does lead a lot to that whole theory of what if we find out that the ultimate, like the master of Kamir, like the real master of the Acolyte turns out to be Soul the whole time, because he's got all these un-Jedi tendencies. He lets his rage take over sometimes. He's made several un-Jedi-like moves. He's very hasty with his decisions. And even back then, he was like obsessed with the twins. Like, he says finding his Padawan, but you could take that as, finding his Acolyte. the rule
Well,
of two kind of coming
so
back.
I
But
feel like we need a whole nother flashback episode, except a flashback to his origin story.
exactly,
Like,
Yeah.
was
I
he
want to know more
taken
about
too
Soul.
old, or what's going on?
I mean, he's my favorite. Like, he's the reason why I watch. Like, I want to know what's going on with him. I love him. Like, I love getting to know him. And yeah, I also really loved this coven, these witches. Are they good guys or bad guys? I don't really know because I think that's kind of how they've left us feeling. But it's quite interesting how it's so like black and white. Like, it's either like half of the coven is just bad people being shady, and then the mama is a sweetheart and she wants like good for her daughter. They mentioned the word sacrifice when they kind of found out what their intentions were with the girls. Do we think that it was like an actual, like, they were going to kill the girls to make a sacrifice, or was that soul just, I don't know, spitballing, like coming up with that conclusion that sacrifice meant we're going to like kill them?
It's left weirdly nebulous, and they
Yeah.
compare them kind of to the Night Sisters, which the Night Sisters deal is largely like they use the dark side, they use dark side magic, but they don't have the same. If left to their own devices, they don't necessarily have the same like galaxy conquering ambitions of the Sith. If you would just leave them alone, for the most part, they tend to just stay on their planet and mind their own business, and maybe rule it in not the most Jedi like way, but are not trying to, like I said, conquer the galaxy. And that's kind of the vibe I got here. I wonder if the sacrifice thing was about like, I wonder if that supposed transfer had gone through as it was intended, if like the twins' personalities would have been lost or something and kind of taken over by their mother, or something like that. It's unclear because the Night Sister mother, or not Night Sister, the witch coven leader, whatever she's called, she's acting like this is also the first time they've ever done this, because these twins like being there and not natural, I guess, being kind of artificial creations. It's unclear if that is just the norm for them or if this is a weird occurrence. Because again, we don't know what a virgins is, or why it matters, or again, very weird to introduce this in the second to last episode, because we have no precedent to base it on. So the entire intention of this coven is entirely unclear, because we don't know. We don't know how long they've been there. We don't know why they were formed. Are they refugees? Are they Sith splinter cult? We have no idea. There are so many things left nebulous, and if that's the point, then that's okay. But I'm not sure that they've made the case for like why that's the point.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
And given how Mother Anastasia was, I guess, sort of transferring her power to May, it makes me think that maybe that sacrifice was, and given how the village is so hyped up, the entire coven really wants this sacrifice, makes me think maybe it was like, because they even talk about force dyads very briefly in past episodes, like maybe they were intentionally made to sacrifice their power to the rest of the village, like maybe because they are artificial and they are not really viewed as children except by Anastasia and her partner, that maybe they're just kind of there to be, for lack of a better term, just turn into like massive batteries to be the source of future power for the rest of this coven. But we just don't know, because it gets interrupted and then never really fleshed out, which is, for as short as these episodes have been, it just feels like there has to be so much context that's just been left on the cutting room floor. And I'm very confused about the decision to do that, given that, like you said, it's episode 7 of 8, and we still have so many questions. And unless episode 8 is an hour and a half episode, which we are pretty sure it's not, it's 45, 48 minutes or something. I don't know how you wrap this up with a bow, given like all the loose ends. There's so many things to have to get answered. And this didn't feel like it did a great job of answering enough of those in the time we had left.
Yeah, I'm really worried.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, I'm really worried, given that the twins and their respective mentor parent swap situation aren't even in the same place at the end of the previous episode, that the next episode isn't going to give us any answers, and they're banking on some sort of second season that I could do without at this point. Honestly, not to be too negative, but I'm not like just tell me what's going on and I'll be good. I don't need you to drag this out for another year.
Donovan in the chat is like, this gave me more questions than answers. Everyone is just question everybody, and that makes me feel better as a casual Star Wars fan, because a lot of times when I'm watching these things, I'm going, oh man, I don't understand, or I don't know why, or what is this, and why was that, and it's nice to see even the experts and the super fans are asking the questions, what is going on. I still really like the show. Like, I do have to say this, I do really like this show, just because the fight choreography is beautiful. I feel like they've done a great job with special effects, and it's just nice to have like a weekly show that I look forward to, with my husband. I get to watch and try to enjoy it. But the big question that I wanted to ask, and like, as soon as I found out I was going to be on the show with you guys, I started looking up, obviously, like the Rotten Tomatoes score and stuff like that, which, by the way, not sure if you guys saw, but the audience score has been officially removed from the Rotten Tomatoes main search. So you have to actually like click the link to get the audience score, which apparently a lot of Disney Plus shows are doing that. But my question is, who is this made for? Like, who is the audience here? Like, who is this geared towards? Because I enjoy it, but if I'm kind of with you, Jamie, if there wasn't a second season, I wouldn't freak out.
I feel like this goes back to me like lightly digging at the show in past episodes about how there's an alternate universe where Disney Plus doesn't exist and there's not this gaping and like ever hungry maw of streaming content that needs to be fed at all times. In this show is what it seems to have been imagined as, which is a Star Wars novel. Like, this is the kind of content that would exist for the hardcore fans to go find out more about like 200 years before the movies and fill in Sith lore. They made those books previously. People have been talking constantly around the show about, the Darth Bane novels, and there was a Darth Plagueis novel that fill in a lot of the history of the Sith. And it feels like that's kind of what we were hinting at. We were talking about a little before the show, like, is this Virgins thing that seemingly creates life, is that somehow tied to how Anakin got immaculately conceived for, as part of apparently Palpatine's grand plan. So it seems to be, in theory, it seems to be for those hardcore fans, of which, I've read Star Wars novels that should appeal to me. But in television form, the execution is so off. Aside from the fight scenes and some of in the previous flashback episode, I really enjoyed the like ritual scenes because those were very visually interesting.
Agreed.
But beside that, like, a lot of the dialogue's weird, a lot of the dialogue's weirdly delivered. I've talked before about how a lot of the sets in this show, well, I hate dumping on craftsmen, but some of the sets just aren't very convincing. This episode, I've talked in the previous episode where they did the big fight scene, I talked about how that felt like watching a Star Wars video game, but like in a cool way, because you got to see a lot of those powers used and stuff. I felt the same way in this episode, except like in a bad way, like watching them climb, like scale the side of the mining facility to get into the Coven. Felt like watching somebody play one of the Star Wars Jedi games where Cal is off doing exploration, except like not exciting. Like, it's just kind of a weird way to get from point A to point B. And some of the characters I've criticized before as being there to move a scene from point A to point B and not really having much personality or a story arc. And surprise, they got killed because that's what they were there to do, was to die. So yeah, I feel like if I were reading this, I might enjoy it more. But as television, I'm just not convinced by the production aspects of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And by the way, for anyone who is just tuning in, hi, welcome. I'm so glad you guys are here. Thanks for joining us. We have a couple questions really quickly, like name, no taken. I missed the start. Did the Jedi burn the Coven? Great question. No, it was an accident all along, which
very flammable stone coven.
That's exactly what my husband, the architect, said. He goes, wait a minute, the whole place is made of stone. I don't understand how this has gone up in flames. But that also left me with more questions as to like who's the good guy, who's wrong, who's right in this. It was all just an accident. Why? Like it's just question after question. Jamie, I can tell you have something to say.
I just that brings up more like one of the things I've said about the show is it feels like a conspiracy show with no conspiracy because everyone knows
Yeah.
what happened. And
Yeah.
this is the same thing because it's like we finally get our answers and it's exactly what everyone said happened, right?
Yeah.
Like it was like they were throwing May under the bus, and they do a little bit by withholding information, but also she did start that fire. Like it's
Yeah.
exactly what everybody assumed from the start. So what was the
Yes,
big
that
secret?
was the weirdest thing
I'm
to
so
me.
confused.
We saw her burn, and it got into, I guess, the electrical wiring, and I guess they had like this witch coven had a really shoddy contractor, so all the electrical wiring's bad. Once it catches on fire, it burns the temple down. But the weirdest part to me was it really seems like it's setting us up for, instead of like unraveling the mystery, it's kind of like forcing us into like one very like obvious path, which is that given that, no one seems to know about this in the future, this obviously gets covered up somehow. This is obviously, and at this point, it's either got to be that Saul is the big bad the whole time, or it's, Vanessa Rowe is pulling the strings behind the scenes the whole time, and maybe she's the big bad. That's why Kamir has the weird, curvy scars on his back as if they were made from a light whip. But I would rather, I keep waiting for the show to surprise me. And sometimes it does with like the amazing fight choreography. Like even here, the very brief fight scenes were very good. And some of the acting, like Lee Jung Jae is a really good actor, especially considering he is phonetically speaking English in this. Like he is doing this all with with tone and like body language. And I feel like he's trying really hard in a show where maybe a few people are there, like just, tapping their wrist, like looking at their watch, just waiting for their scene to end so they can grab a check. And it's just very odd to see someone so earnestly trying so hard, juxtaposed. And same with Kamir's actor. Oh, man, I completely blanked on his name.
Is it Manny
Manny
Jacinto?
Jacinto,
Is that right?
yes.
Yeah.
Manny Jacinto also clearly trying very, very hard and doing a good job. But then every now and then you get just some weird, and there were a couple of them in this episode where some of the things that the sisters were doing just felt odd. And Torben's young actor just feels weird and whiny and like he doesn't really know what he's quite doing here. And when you have that combined with the fact that we now appear to be railroaded into like this one destination of it's going to be some kind of Jedi cover up, but we don't really have anything worth covering up. It's so strange. Like this is all a cover up based around one guy making a weird decision, and not even a weird decision, but just like a decision in the heat of the moment. And it almost feels like May and Osha were just plot devices. Like Amanda Stenberg did a really good job in her scenes by being like, she's a very different May than she is an Osha. Like the acting is really good, but her character after episode 2 or 3 just feels like it's there to drive the plot forward, but the plot doesn't seem to have anywhere to go. So I'm just confused as to how this gets wrapped up in 8, barring like some massive, like game-changing 180 plot twist that just comes out of nowhere, which could be possible, but just seems like, did we have to go through these 7 episodes to get to that?
Yeah.
I will add on the conspiracy thing. I will note Indira was very intent on taking that council call by herself, and we do not see how that actually goes down. And she's very intent on Soul not calling them back.
Wow.
And nothing we've seen explains why the fact that Osha had a sister was omitted from the Jedi records, which, Ford Rando or whatever his name is said in a previous episode, were not in her records or whatever, which is really weird considering the official explanation for what happened on this planet was her sister burned it down, that they would leave that out of the record, but not terribly good at cover-ups, I guess. And also the other thing, this episode, I was bothered by the fact that, so in episode 1, when Indira fights May, May has this really loaded comment about like, Indira's like, Jedi don't attack unarmed civilians or whatever. And she's like, oh, we both know they do. Nothing in this episode sets up that quote. Like, we
Yeah.
don't see the Jedi murdering any unarmed
Gosh,
people.
that's a good memory.
So that loaded, like that was one of my favorite parts of the early episode was like, ooh, that's a cool line and this cool fight scene or whatever. And now, unless something happens in the next episode to fill in a blank, it doesn't make any sense. Like, I don't know why she would have said that. Just so many more questions coming up.
So, speaking of other questions, can you guys help explain what the Vergence is? Because I know Jamie talked about, this is something we probably should have known about the entire series, and then they just pull it up out of nowhere in this episode, and they're like, "Hey, it's this really special thing. What's up? What is it?"
No, I can't. I can't help you there.
I got you. It's because it's really stupid. Well, not stupid. It's really weird High Republic lore that kind of got mixed into like a lot of the old backstory. It's basically like a Force nexus.
Ooh.
It's back before the sequels got all obsessed with Force dyads. The big thing was like being a Vergence is sort of like a locus or like a massive concentration of a naturally gathered force. So it's basically like almost like a kind of like a reverse black hole where it's like the force just seems to be welling out of somewhere with no real rhyme or reason. And it's just sort of, it's considered to be like they're kind of hoping maybe it's the source of the force. Although in Ahsoka, we learned that might be the weird planet that Ezra was on with the statues of the brother and the sister and the father. But I think here it's just one of those things where I think they believe it still is a force nexus. It's like a big well of unnatural force energy that's kind of popped up in one location.
Gotcha.
Interesting. That's
So
a
then-
lot, though. Like, don't you feel like they should have explained that a little bit?
Yeah, no, they definitely should have, because I had to double check that when I was watching this episode.
You're Googling.
I was like, I remember someone saying this in like a High Republic book like 5 years ago, and I was like, I don't remember if that's correct.
Wow.
That's funny.
Wow.
I
Just
glossed
had to
over
look it
that
up.
entirely. I did remember they mentioned that this planet was supposedly messed up by a hyperspace accident. I was like, oh, I know that. That's what kicks off the whole High Republic thing when the ship gets pulled out of hyperspace and it's not supposed to, so it just explodes across the galaxy or whatever. That's how the whole High Republic begins. And so I was like, oh, I get that reference. The Vergence thing went completely over my head. I did not remember that at all.
Oh, it's also kind of like a thin spot between the Force. If you consider like the Force is like its own world, and like we have our world and the Force has some world, like the Vergence is also like a thin spot. Like it's where like a crack. It's if you like Doctor Who, it's the crack in the wall.
So maybe like the cave on Dagobah and stuff.
100%. That's another great example of something
like a dark side Vergence type deal.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Okay.
See-
that helps a lot. Peter, I'm glad you're here. But would you guys still, I guess if we didn't know that, would it have bothered you? Would have had even like stuck out at all? Because for me watching, it was just a word that they said and I was like, oh, it must have something to do with there's just cool energy on this planet.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think knowing what it is didn't really miss much. Also, Katie McLeod in the comments, 100% right. Qui-Gon did say that he had encountered a Vergence in the Phantom Menace, so it does date back to the prequels too. We're not ever sure what that is, but she's totally right. Like he did say that. So there's some history for it, but it's always kind of been the weird kind of nebulous term.
Is he talking? I need to go back and watch that now because now I wonder: is he talking about Anakin now?
Yes,
because that's the whole. That was
Orlando
what triggered in my
came
brain
on.
was like,
Yeah.
is a Vergence how we got Anakin? Because Anakin doesn't have a father.
Wow.
Yeah, and he has an unnaturally strong connection to the Force, and there's things happen around him that shouldn't be possible. And
Just
they call
like
the twins the same thing.
Just like the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, this whole series is going to end up existing to explain one weird line of dialogue in a Star Wars movie. Unbelievable.
While subsequently changing like several other lines of dialogue to make them weird and requiring further interpretation and possibly another show. Although, hey, sometimes that's great. Sometimes, you get many bosuns have died for this and you get Rogue One, which is amazing. And
I
sometimes
love
then
it.
you get from Rogue One, you get Andor. You get like 2 steps away. You get
Well, that
Andor.
was that's a good question. Would you say that this is on the same level as some of the other Disney Plus shows as far as like you don't have to rank them all, but would this be like really high up on your liking or disliking side of like where would it fall between shows for you on Disney Plus?
Pete, you want to take that one first?
I'll go first. So I think that's a great because I think we've seen enough now, barring a huge twist, to
Yeah.
kind of have at least some idea of what's
Yeah.
happening. I think, I mean, at number one with the bullet has to be Andor because it's some of the best TV that was made that year.
Mhm.
And then I think this probably falls. This probably falls towards the. Honestly, like barring some of like the animation stuff, this might be the very lowest for me right now.
Wow.
And I don't think that it's terrible. I think that it has redeeming episodes. I just think that they're spread apart with these filler episodes. It should have been. It should have just been like 6 episodes if they were going to do this, and just compress parts of each episode into the other one. But this is like, I think, like a bad Star Wars show is still something I'm happy to watch. You know, if Star Wars is Star Wars, I still enjoy it. But this is definitely below Ahsoka because there's no amazing Ray Stevenson performance to just carry it through.
Mhm.
This and and there's no, even if Obi-Wan screws with the canon a lot, like at least you got Hayden Christensen. It was nice to see him back, and it was
And
always good to have Ewan McGregor acting
Ewan McGregor,
again.
yeah.
And they brought back some really interesting characters. I love seeing Kumail Nanjiani show up as the fake Jedi in the first. I thought that was great. But I think this is probably, of the new batch of TV stuff, it's probably bottom of the heap for me,
Wow.
which is sad because it has some great episodes, but it also has some very weak episodes.
Mhm. Jamie, what do you think?
I'm largely going to agree with Pete. I think Andor is kind of in a class of its own, where like
Mhm.
it transcends just being like a good Star Wars show. It's just good television that anyone should watch. Like it's just very good on its own merits, regardless of Star Wars or whatever. And then for me, like those first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian, I thought were something special because they really tapped into a kind of style of television that I feel like has been lost, which was just that uh kind of wandering hero episodic adventure type thing before you can see this turning point when all the other shows get announced and then it starts getting tied into like world building and setting up other shows and all that stuff. But those first couple of seasons I thought were something special. And then kind of everything else, speaking of live action specifically, because I think animation has been much more consistently good for Star Wars.
Yeah, 100%.
But all the other shows, your Obi-Wan, your Book of Boba Fett, they're like kind of like Pete was alluding to. They're kind of like cold pizza Star Wars, where it's Star Wars and it's fun and it's still enjoyable. If you like, if you like hot Star Wars, you'll probably still enjoy cold Star
Yeah.
Wars pretty okay. And they're all kind of this thing where they have good stuff in them and you kind of see the original vision for them. And like that vision is cool, but then it feels like something was lost in the translation of vision to actually making the show. And we know in some cases, like Obi-Wan Kenobi got huge rewrites, changed what the show was all about before it made it to screen. And it feels like something was lost in translation there. Book of Boba Fett, I feel like my theory is suffered because they were trying to set up something bigger and Rangers of the High Republic got canceled, so they had to shift things around. But either way, that show ended up being messy and clumsy and weird towards the end. They're all kind of like that, where it's like, well, this is a cool idea. I wish you pulled it off a little better than you did.
Yeah. Ironically, I would have put this above Book of Boba Fett if not for the Mandalorian episode of the Book of Boba Fett, where it just becomes like, hey, we know the show isn't great, but what if we give you like a really good episode of the Mando just kind of out of nowhere? And we'll even, we'll sneak in Timothy Oliphant at the very end, but he'll get shot by Cad Bane to set up a show that might not be being made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Brad Tipton in the chat. I just have to answer this question. Someone who likes the show, why do you like this? And does lore breaking bother you? And I do like the show, so I'll answer. The lore bending doesn't bother me. Breaking obviously does. If they're being obscure and if I haven't retained that lore because I'm not as like deep into it as some. I can buy into it, and I do love like the world building. I like the witchy like background of stuff. I love the fight combat stuff. I love the acting. I'm a big fan of the cast, but I completely understand why some folks are just heck no. This is not Star Wars. But then again, like it's hard out here, y'all. It's hard out here for a casual Star Wars fan because sometimes you will get crucified for not knowing things or for liking something that maybe you shouldn't. But I think that if you just go in casually, like if we ever have anyone casual viewers watching this show, us right now, I would be very curious to get your thoughts and have you let me know what you think. So make sure you tweet me and let me know because we're all in this we're all in this together. Okay. We're on Disney Plus. I had to do it. Like it's now,
I
Star
don't
Wars
get that
on Disney.
reference.
Yeah. I know. Am I showing my age right now? And then we also had another question, and I totally get it. Not everybody caught everything on the episode. I was dealing with my newborn. Did they explain the witches' deaths? Do you guys feel like they accurately like showed that? Because I saw some people in the chat saying, "Oh, well, it was the fire and it just took everyone out and they just assumed, or it was like the fight between the Wookiee and so I honestly don't know. I completely
It
missed it.
seems like, and they only give us like an establishing shot afterwards, like
Yeah.
the classic like sad Star Wars rotating establishing shot that pulls back from the top, and that is just sort of they all lost consciousness after they got booted out of Kelnaka's mind, and then they just laid on the ground and their temple burned down around them. That seems to be what we were meant to believe happened to them. Is they all kind of went into a coma after getting booted out of Kelnaka's mind, and that just left them vulnerable to the fire. And that seems to be what has happened, at least
That's
based on
pretty
this last
terrible.
episode. Yeah.
I wonder if that was intentional on Indira's part, if she is indeed part of some weird conspiracy.
That's the other thing there. That leads into the whole like it's got like the master, unless it's a completely out of left field character, has got to be either Indara or I think Vernestra has been set up so much that it really can't be her, but who knows? Or Vernestra or Soul. And if it's Indara, then all of a sudden that's just part of that pattern you're talking about. Don't call back the High Republic, or don't call back the Jedi Council, and I'm going to boot these people out of their mind, but I'm going to do it in a way that just completely renders them comatose in the middle of a fire. Like it's when Mother Anastasia left the mind of Torben, it seemed to have no ill effects. But when apparently being forcibly booted out puts you into a coma of which a fire cannot rouse you.
I like what Katie said in the chat. Think the Matrix when they pull the plug while they're still jacked in.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
really
I think that's what they were going for. But Jamie could be
why,
right.
Which is why they cast Carrie-Anne Moss. That's
Exactly.
the entire reason.
That's true. We just keep talking about the Matrix.
And that's a
Love
great point, most average gamer 4. Yes, they did not show what happened to the archers. There was just a palisade of archers.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, they did pointedly show that they were no longer on that palisade, though, as if they just teleported away.
Oh, I thought that was an entirely different group because there's so many different groups of people in this coven.
Oh, maybe I misunderstood, but that's what I got. I thought, but because they show the empty thing and then they show them doing the meditation thing. I'm like, oh, they just went to their meditation room, I guess.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Weird.
Okay, so I know we kind of touched on it, but I feel like we have to just do this one last time. Are they going to be able to wrap up this show and successfully end it in one more episode? Because our finale is next week, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Do we know the runtime?
It's supposed to be about the same as this one, which
Wow.
was 45 minutes, but that was with 7.5 minutes of credits. It was really about 37.5 minutes.
Okay.
Does not seem like enough time to me.
Nope. Thoughts? What do you think we can expect? What do you want to see? What are you like? What do they have to do to win this series?
I'm gonna call right now that we're going to get a minute 36 big reveal, and that's going to be the last minute of the episode, and it's going to ambiguously end there in the hopes of setting up a potential season 2 while also sort of answering some questions about season 1. But I fully expect like we're going to get the I have this at home version of Luke showing up in the Mando, but we're going to get it with the Master showing up, and it'll be for 1 minute, and then it'll just fade to black.
Yep. It'll be done in a way that suggests like this is how we were going to end it all along, and you can fill in the rest.
Yeah.
But really angling for a second season. But yeah, I don't. My confidence is very low. It feels like with one episode of that length left, either not enough happens, not enough answers happen, and it ends up being kind of a wet blanket of an episode that doesn't excite, or they go hard in the other direction and throw a whole bunch of stuff out there that has not been properly foreshadowed and set up in a way that it actually feels right instead of just sudden.
That's what I expect that. I expect us to get like that usual suspect dropping the coffee mug moment, but with like nothing to explain the references. Just shows up, smashes the coffee mug, and then roll credits.
Yeah. I just don't see how they're going to have, how are we going to get enough time with every single character that they've introduced us to, and them obviously all being spread out at this point. I can't even remember where anyone is right now because this was a flashback episode, and it's hard for me to even recall where we left our main characters. So I'm very concerned with how it's all going to come together, like actually come together in person, seeing these people all in one place. And if we don't get that, I just don't know. I just don't feel like that's how I want to leave it. I don't think I want to just see everybody in their own little bubble and then to be continued. No, I would like to see some kind of resolution, and I'm a little worried that they're not going to give us anything.
Yeah, it feels like this is a Rogue One thing where no matter what happens, we're going to get that, the hug on the beach scene where the explosion happens, because like logistically, no one is going to make this make it out of this alive except for the person pulling the strings. Canonically, basically everyone here was a dead man walking from the time they first showed up in this series, given the lack of like knowledge about this event down the line. And that's when people complain about like the show has a lot of faults, but when they complain about it ruins the lore, I was like, no, this is obviously going to be covered up. The reason no one knows about it is because it's 100% going to be covered up some way or another. That part of the lore breaking makes I'm fine with that. It's just the execution of everything that brought us here that's the problem. It's not everyone we've seen in the show I would not get too attached to, because the body count on episode 8 is almost certainly going to be incredibly high.
Yeah, if not the whole series.
Yeah.
I see you in the chat, Kofi. I see you throwing us out here to the wolves. Yeah, I'm definitely worried, especially considering we have at least 3 different plots going into the finale, because you have Sol and May on their ship heading to Coruscant, maybe? I forget where they're going. We have Osha with her new hat on not Acto. And then we have like Vanessa Rowe is still on that other planet everybody left. Like, I don't even know what we're still doing there. I do not know how you bring those, unless they just start off with like everybody's together again somehow. Like, I don't know what you do there. I wouldn't want to be the person tasked with writing that episode.
Yeah. Well, you guys, here you have it. This is kind of our thoughts on this episode. I will say my final thought is that I started off this show with you guys thinking that I really liked this episode, and slowly my likeage has gone like down the more we've broken it down. And I feel like there's something to say for casually viewing something as opposed to really working for Comicbook.com and breaking it down and kind of getting schooled on Star Wars lore and everything. And so I kind of do understand where everybody stands on this. If you guys want to talk more, feel free to tweet us. We're around. We love chatting with you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Any last thoughts, y'all?
Not off the top of my head. Honestly, I feel like we've gotten it all out there.
Yeah.
I no final cheap shots from me now.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, Thank you so much, Peter, for hanging out.
No
We love
problem.
when our producer gets to hang out with us on these chats. When I found out he's been on other shows, I was like, will you please jump on with us? This will be great. And he did. So thank you so much for being here. And then Jamie also. It's always great to see you. We will be live again. If you guys are looking for more information on anything geeky, make sure to check out our show. I'm one of the co-hosts of Comic Book Nation, and we are live on Fridays. You can find us on all of your podcasting sites, and we are live at 12 p.m. Central, or no, Eastern. And yeah, we just love you guys hanging out with us. So thanks for being so chatty with us in the comments, and we will see you guys real soon. Thanks for watching Acolyte Aftermath, and we'll see you next week for the next episode. Good luck, Kofi.